What if you prayed for a miracle
Just let it be over.
and it came true? In 1957, John and Florence Pollock lost their two young daughters in a tragic accident. Grief-stricken, John, a firm believer in reincarnation, prayed for them to return. A year later, his wife gave birth to twins. He knew his prayer was answered not just by their faces, but by the marks they carried, scars from a life they had never lived. The Pollock family lived in the quiet English town of Hexham, where John and Florence raised their two daughters, Joanna and Jacqueline, in a devout Catholic home. 11-year-old Joanna was motherly and protective of her 6-year-old sister Jacqueline. The two were inseparable. But on May 5, 1957, their idyllic life was shattered. While walking to church, a distraught driver deliberately veered her car onto the sidewalk. Joanna and Jacqueline were killed instantly, alongside their friend Anthony. The tragedy devastated the Pollock family and their small community. In their grief, a rift grew between the parents. Florence tried to bury her pain by never speaking of her daughters. John, however, clung to a private belief in reincarnation, which was at odds with his Catholic faith. Convinced his daughters weren't truly gone, he began to pray for their return. This conviction nearly tore their marriage apart, with Florence staunchly rejecting the idea. Then, Florence discovered she was pregnant. John was certain it was a continuation, not a new start. He began predicting, with absolute faith, that she was carrying twins, the reincarnated souls of Joanna and Jacqueline. Florence and her doctors disagreed. There was no history of twins in their families, and they were convinced it was a single child. Their home became a battleground between faith and reason. But on October 4th, 1958, to the shock of everyone in the delivery room, Florence gave birth to identical twin girls. John named them Gillian and Jennifer. For him, the miracle had begun. While examining his newborns, John's heart stopped. His late daughter Jacqueline had two specific marks, a birthmark on her left hip and a scar on her forehead from a childhood fall. Now, as he looked at one of the twins, Jennifer, he saw the same two marks. She had a birthmark on her left hip in the exact same spot, and on her forehead, a faint line precisely where Jacqueline's scar had been. Gillian, the other twin, had no such marks. This was the first piece of staggering physical evidence. Since Gillian and Jennifer were identical twins, they shared the same genetic code. For one to have these marks while the other didn't was a biological anomaly. But for a father who had prayed for a sign, it was a clear message. As the twins grew, the eerie similarities mounted. Gillian, older by 10 minutes, became protective of Jennifer, the same dynamic Joanna had with Jacqueline. When the twins were around 2, John brought out their late sister's toys. Despite never being told about them, the girls' reactions were immediate. They claimed specific dolls that had belonged to their sisters and divided the other toys with unnerving accuracy, exactly as their sisters had. Later, on a visit to Hexham, a town the twins shouldn't remember, they pointed out landmarks. They identified their sister's school and knew the way to a park they'd never seen, describing swings that were out of sight. Most disturbing was their shared, paralyzing fear of cars. At the sound of an engine, they'd cry out, "The car is coming to get us!" The climax came when Florence overheard them playing a chilling game. Gillian was cradling Jennifer's head, saying,
"The blood's coming out of your eyes. That's where the car hit you."
It seemed they were reliving the very trauma that took their sisters' lives, despite the parents swearing they never spoke of the details. What do you think is happening here? Is this a case of incredible coincidence and parental suggestion, or are we witnessing memories that have transcended death? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The case eventually reached Dr. Ian Stevenson, a respected psychiatrist from the University of Virginia. Stevenson wasn't a sensationalist. He dedicated his career to the rigorous scientific study of reincarnation, documenting cases of children with apparent past life memories. He began investigating the Pollocks in 1963, interviewing the family over 2 decades. For Stevenson, the case was one of the most compelling in the Western world. He highlighted 2 key factors. First, the physical evidence. Jennifer's birthmarks were a classic example he'd seen in his research, where children's marks correspond to the wounds of a deceased person. That Jennifer's identical twin lacked these marks made a simple genetic explanation unlikely. Second, the memories. Stevenson found it inconceivable that the parents could have coached the twins so perfectly, given the specificity of their knowledge and the raw reality of their phobias. He concluded that the Pollock case was powerful evidence that personality and even physical wounds could carry over from one life to the next. Of course, skeptics offer compelling alternative explanations. The main criticism centers on the father. John Pollock desperately wanted to believe, having prayed for this very outcome. This opens the door to parental suggestion. Critics argue the twins weren't remembering a past life, but simply absorbing their parents' grief and beliefs through subtle cues. A child can easily sense tension around cars or sadness when an old toy is mentioned. The twins' behavior could be a reflection of the family's unspoken trauma, which the parents then interpreted as proof, a classic case of confirmation bias. Furthermore, nearly all the evidence is anecdotal, reported by the parents themselves. Another theory is cryptomnesia, or hidden memory, suggesting the girls may have overheard details about their sisters from others, then later recalled the information without remembering the source, making it feel like a personal memory. These arguments don't imply a hoax, but rather a grieving family finding meaning wherever they could. As Gillian and Jennifer grew, the vivid memories and phobias began to fade. By age 5, they had almost completely disappeared, a phenomenon Dr. Stevenson noted as common in his research. The girls grew up to live normal lives, and as adults had no personal memory of a past life, accepting their parents' story but remaining neutral. The story seems to end there, so where does that leave us? The Pollock twins' story is one of the most compelling cases for reincarnation ever documented. On one hand, there's the startling evidence. The birthmarks on one identical twin but not the other, the specific unprompted memories, and the validation of a serious scientific investigator. On the other, there's the powerful influence of grief and a father's desperate hope, offering a plausible psychological explanation. Ultimately, the case forces us to ask a fundamental question. Is our consciousness finite, or can it transcend death? Was this a miracle, or a testament to the human heart's search for hope in the face of loss? The mystery endures, and what you choose to believe is up to you. If this story fascinated you, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into the world's greatest mysteries. And check out our other videos that are equally baffling. Thanks for watching.